everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the SafeHouse Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the SafeHouse Initiative, and your host for today's podcast. Cybersecurity is really a journey, and you hear a lot of terms and a lot of framework references, things of that nature. There's a lot of different frameworks, and there is always a question is, what more do I need to do? Where am I? Am I maturing fast enough? Have I done enough? And that's one thing that we like to do here at the Safe House, is bring in experts that can help give us some insights and some guidance, if you will. And today, Kelly Hood is going to be our guest, and so thrilled to have her. Hey, welcome, Kelly.
Hi, Jeff. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, Kelly Hood, you're currently the Executive Vice President and also a cybersecurity engineer. So you're playing offense and defense in a way. You run the company and you are doing the work. So hats off to you. And you work for a company called Optic Cyber Solutions.
Yeah, I co-founded Optic Cyber Solutions about 5 years ago now. And so definitely have a lot of hats in the company, both on the protecting side and then also helping our clients to make sure that their environments are secure.
Yeah, well, it sounds very impressive. Why don't you share a bit about your journey to where you are today so the audience can get to know you a bit more?
Yeah, definitely. So it was not a straight shot. You hear, I guess you don't hear that often in the world of cybersecurity. But yeah, it started off in chemical engineering, but then started taking some cybersecurity classes in college and thought, hey, this is more interesting. This is more fun. So moved on quickly. Started doing some commercial product certification through the Common Criteria program, and then moved over from products to companies doing assessments for clients across industries using the NIST cybersecurity framework. I actually had the opportunity to support NIST as a contractor on some of the initial work with the cybersecurity framework and found that it was a really great tool for working with companies.
Well, yeah, to that end, why frameworks? Can you kind of help the audience understand the value of a framework and how it helps us figure out where we are?
Definitely. I think frameworks are a critical tool for figuring out where you are. And even as I was, starting my career, really helped me to understand, what does cybersecurity mean? It's one of those terms that's so loaded that, everybody has a different idea of what cybersecurity means to them. I get people asking me how many hours of my day do I spend coding? And that's not how I spend any of my hours, because I'm working more on the strategic side and writing policies and drafting up, what should that incident response plan say? But yet at the same time, I'm not the one that's responding to the incident. And there's just so many different aspects. And so I think frameworks help to create that structure to say, what are we talking about here, and scope that conversation to allow you to go a level deeper.
So it helps you define what really cybersecurity means to me.
Right. What does cybersecurity mean? And then what do I do about it?
Yes. So that helps you find out where you are and where do you start?
Exactly. Because then you can orient yourself. I find when I'm learning something new, especially if I don't have a way to kind of orient myself in the world of whatever it is, that I just get lost and I can't retain the information. And so for me, something like a framework, it really helps to I can see where I am in the world. If somebody's talking about vulnerability management, I can say, oh, hey, that's addressing these requirements, or that's this part of the framework. But yet there's this other thing called governance, and I need to do that too. But also I need to, respond to incidents, and you can see how it all fits together, and it helps me organize things in my head. I think that's a really great value a framework brings.
So how do you, where do you begin with a customer, and then kind of walk us on a journey as you kind of help your customer, pretend we're a customer for you. And I know we don't sell anything on the Safe House or advocate anything, but I think taking kind of the day of a life of being one of your clients is maybe a good way for us to have this conversation.
Yeah. One of the first things we start with when we engage a new client is to figure out where are they today? Even if somebody comes to us and says, I've just got this new cybersecurity role. I don't know what we're doing. We're not doing anything. Help me get started. Oftentimes they're doing something. You've got passwords on your accounts. You might have, MFA turned on. You've got, you might have encryption turned on by default on your workstation. There are things that are likely going to be in place already. And so we we like to kind of level set and say, and get an idea of what's already in place today, and then have a conversation about risk. What do you care about? When you think about your business, are you worried about protecting your sensitive data? Are you worried about, not changing those financial records and the numbers? Or do you just need to have, your systems up because you're a sales oriented company or a focused company that you need to always have your website up and running? But those conversations tend to really help us orient, are those things that are in place today enough, or do we need to start adding additional capabilities?
Do you find your clients the conversation of risk a challenging one?
It often is, because it's one of those things where
Yeah.
everybody thinks everything is important, and everything is important, but there's
Yeah.
always a priority, and there's
Yeah.
always something that's more important than something else. And that's what's kind of fun to tease out when you say, breaking it down for security to think, confidentiality, integrity, availability. If you say, which one do you care about? You say, all, of course.
Yeah.
But when you really get into it, there's going to be that, customer data, or that proprietary product, or your website, or something that matters more than something else. And that's what's really interesting to get into, to figure out where we're going to spend our what's inevitably going to be limited time and resources to make sure we're either protecting that data or keeping those systems up and running. Those are the things we want to focus on first.
Yeah. So when you engage with your clients, who's involved in that? Just kind of have a picture of that. Is it the executive team? Is it people throughout the organization, or some combination thereof?
Right. We always try to get a combination, because what's funny is whenever you have these conversations in silos and you meet with the operators, you get one answer. When you meet with the CISO, you get a completely different answer sometimes. We've sat in rooms where, you talk with the IT lead and they'll say, well, I know this is our most critical system and we can't let it go down because 3 years ago it went down for an hour and everybody was at my office yelling at me, telling me to get it up. But then we turn around and we'll talk to a business lead later, and they'll say, "Oh, well, we only need those systems running every second Tuesday of the month, but
Yeah.
it happened to go down on that day." And so the IT team then is so worried about keeping the system up and not patching it or doing things that they should be, because they're too worried about it. But getting everybody in the room is what can really help to bring some of those points to light, because we can tease those out rather than just getting one perspective. You don't
Yeah.
always get the full picture.
Yeah. Do you also find that people understand that they do have a hand and a responsibility in the whole scheme of things when they think, oh, that's IT's job, or that's the CISO's job?
That's a great point. Is oftentimes, when you talk to people that don't necessarily have security in their name, they say, "Oh, well,
Uh-huh.
that's, somebody else has got that covered, I'm sure."
That's
And then you talk to
Tommy's. That's Jane's.
the
Yeah.
exactly. Everybody points back to Jane, and then you talk to Jane, and she says, "Oh, well, I do this piece, but everybody else is supposed to be doing this too."
So in a way, you're like a therapist when you come in.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it can feel that way, is getting everybody to have these conversations.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's, people come back to us and tell us, this was the first time I had talked to somebody from legal or somebody from, this
Yeah.
other partner group. And they come back and they're like, now I know who to go to when I have questions, or if I run into problems and need some help, I can go over there. And so you're right. It is sometimes a little bit like therapy, and sometimes like they're learning about their own company as we go.
Well, I think that would be one of the great values of implementing a cybersecurity a security program that's it's thoughtful, and it's systemic in nature, and it's corporate wide, and it's part of the culture, I guess. And that kind of links us back to the maturity aspect. Is that part of the maturity of assessment that you do?
Yeah, and getting into maturity is one of my favorite areas to dig into, because it's so again, cybersecurity can be so nuanced. You can say you need to do access control and make sure that
Yeah.
people aren't coming into the building, and I can put a buy clock on the door and call that access control. Say,
Yeah.
I've got
Yeah.
something done, but that's
Yeah.
sure not very mature.
Yeah.
Um, But on the other end, do I need to have a biometric palm scanner with a card, a card reader as well? Like, I don't know if you're a bank, maybe, if you've got the cash, but not every company is going to need that. And so figuring out how mature your capabilities need to be and what's sufficient is, again, another fun way to kind of get into the weeds.
But that also links back right to the risk, right? What is the risk? How risky do you want to be versus how mature you want to be? Is there a correlation there?
Exactly. No, that's a great point. Is that's how we inevitably get to those conversations about maturity is saying, because you have, a risk of somebody, walking into the bank and stealing all the money, we need to have these protections in place to make sure that doesn't happen versus if we say we're the weather channel, and we're putting out the weather data freely and available, on the internet, like I don't need to protect the confidentiality of that as much. That's a lower priority because that's already going to get out there.
Yeah, so you're like a Sherpa and a counselor all in one. So you come in, you say, okay, let's figure out where you are. And I brought this, let's agree upon a framework. Let's call that our map of sorts. So we're going to figure out how to get to the top of this mountain. I'll lead you there, but we got to use some kind of a mapping tool to get there. And actually, you have a tool, don't you, that you use or that organizations can use? It's called a mapped. Did I get that correct?
Yes, yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned really a framework is like a map, and we have a tool, called Mapped, MAPT, for
Yeah.
maturity and progress tracker to help us
Hmm.
get there. And we created this because we kept having these conversations with companies that were saying, I don't necessarily need a third party, but I need to have a way to track what I'm doing and to have an organized way to do that. And that's one of the things we do every day. And so we created this free tool that you can go download that'll let you track, capture what you're doing today, record what maturity you think you are. If you've got the bike lock on the door, you're going to be a 1. If you've got the biometric scanner, maybe you're a 5. And then it'll
Yeah.
let you track progress towards goals.
Nice. Okay, so people can probably get that if they reach out to you and connect with you through your website or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Reach out to me directly or reach out to Optic Cyber Solutions, and I'd be happy to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, we can also because you're a content contributor of the Safe House, the logo. Just click on that, you can get there also. But yeah, free tools are always great to have.
Right, right. And that's where we know that cybersecurity is challenging and budgets are limited. So we wanted to be able to have something that people can use to get started and be able
Great.
to make progress on their own.
Well, I would appreciate that very much. So, um, do you have any war stories of shocking? You walk into a situation and go, "Oh my God, we got a big problem here."
Right. We've got a few. I've got some fun ones where it's always funny the things you learn that aren't a part of the conversation. Sometimes when you go in to do an assessment and things that you
Yeah.
just see around the office, like an insurance company that leaves their paperwork, their sensitive documents that need to be shredded, they've hired that third party, company to come in and destroy the documents for them, but they've left them in the hall outside of the office to pick up because it's after hours for
Wow.
anybody to go gather. So
Oh,
they've
that's
they've gotten
fun.
halfway there.
Yeah, here, we'll just leave it on the street for them. Make it convenient. Oh,
Exactly, exactly. So that was a fun one that to see they had the right idea, but the execution wasn't quite there. Or we've
interesting.
seen scenarios back to access control where we come in, we're brought in as a third party assessor, and they're trying to do all the right things because they know they're about to get a report. And they say, okay, we've got this card reader to get in and out of the office. Make sure you scan in when you go out to go to the bathroom or, to leave for the day. And then they end up propping the door because it's easier because they only have one card and there's 4 of us. And so
Oh,
they have a process, but they're not necessarily following it.
yeah. So let me ask you a question. There's a certain realization at some point an organization goes through that says, you know what, I think we need some help. And that's when they reach out to an organization like yourself, right? Right. There's a certain stage of maturity that they're in when they say, they're going, ooh, maybe we do need some help. We can't do this on our own. Is there a maturity common starting point?
Yeah, a lot of times that's when companies, they've done their first pass. They think they've got a good start, but there's step back and they say, I only know what I know. And I know there are things
Mhm.
that I don't know. So let me bring somebody in to have that second set of eyes. And that's one of the things that makes it fun for me because we get to work with so many different types of companies and bring that second set of eyes
Yeah.
Otherwise, it can often be instigated if there's been some type of breach, as we get, unfortunately, a fair number of calls from people that say, "I had this incident, and now my boss is asking what we're doing to make sure this doesn't happen again."
Do people get overwhelmed at first when you say, "Oh, we got 44 things that you probably need to do straight away"? Do you kind of help say, "Wait, let's break this down. Let's take the first three, then the next"? Do you have to kind of spoon feed or kind of lay out a good, way forward for your organizations that you help?
Right. Yeah. I think creating a roadmap of what to do next is one of the
Yeah,
most important things, I think, in some type of assessment, whether you're doing it yourself or you brought somebody else in.
yeah,
Because we've seen so many companies that get a list of findings or, multiple hundreds of things to do. And you're right, you get overwhelmed. But so
yeah,
many of those things can usually be grouped together or, organized in a way that if I do this, I'm really checking off these three other things. And so that's one of the things I like to do is to go through and kind of create that strategic plan.
yeah.
But often it takes, you just have to step back and look and kind of group clusters of like things, these all support vulnerability management. Or if I write one policy document, I can address all of these things where we haven't given anybody direction on what we expect them to do. Um, but yeah, finding a way to get your arms around it is can often be a challenge. But that's also where using a framework can help, I think, to be able to
Yeah,
tie it
yeah,
back to a framework and say this is why we're doing it. We found also helps to be able to get additional budget from leadership. If you say, I need to do this because we have a compliance requirement, that's a real good driver. Or,
yeah.
because, this framework says that we need to have, asset management capabilities in place, then it can often help you to actually get additional resources to make those things happen.
Yeah, and I think you could probably use, I'm just guessing, and look for your input here. Use the framework as, hey, let's celebrate our victories, our accomplishments, and say and do that on a regular basis. Is that something that seems to work well?
Right, right. It gives you that measuring stick. It's, often it's your map, it's your measuring stick.
Yeah,
It's a way to communicate with your team, with your stakeholders, maybe even with your partners, to be able to
yeah.
say we're doing all the things that are defined here, and pick your framework. I like to use the NIST cybersecurity framework a lot because I think it's a great communication tool with the language that it uses, and it's so commonly or widely adopted, that you can say we've addressed all of the subcategories or the categories, and this is how we're meeting these requirements or these outcomes.
So in this process, as you go through, is there a combination, I would assume, for third parties that you depend upon in your world, if you will, in terms of making sure that they have their house in order, or does that become part of the journey?
Yeah, I think third parties and supply chain is such a critical piece of the puzzle today
Yeah,
because nobody does anything in a vacuum.
yeah,
We're all using, Office 365 or,
hmm,
AWS or, one of, any of these cloud or SaaS products to do our, daily business, whether it's
right,
on the, our document store or even just running the business. You hear, QuickBooks and all kinds of different tools that are available that have your data. And what we often don't know is how they're securing what they're doing, and if they're going to keep your data safe and what kind of protections they have. And that opens up, yeah, a whole other world.
yeah. Do you have any just final general thoughts in terms of this journey?
I think it's just so important to, like we've been talking about, having a framework, having that structure,
Yeah,
something that you can measure against. Because oftentimes, whenever you're going by your gut and you're implementing this new feature because you heard you got the marketing email or you heard on the radio that something went wrong and you buy
yeah,
this thing.
yeah,
And oftentimes they're good things to do, but we don't know if it's the most important thing to do or if it's going to have the biggest impact on your company specifically. So I think, yeah, I'd say using a framework, build out that roadmap, and that would really be the my biggest recommendation there.
yeah, yeah. So the journey is filled with steps, and the first step is always the hardest, right? So if
Yeah.
there's one thing that somebody could actually do today, what would that one thing be, you think?
Yeah, I think a great place to start, which sounds a little bit simplistic, is figure out what you have. We work
Uh,
with so many companies that, they know what they know, but they don't realize that they've got, 10 other servers in the corner that somebody else bought when they weren't looking, or
yeah,
they've got, a bunch of workstations that, should have been decommissioned, but they haven't been turned on in a while, except when they need to because they hired somebody and didn't have time to order something.
yeah,
But really just getting your arms around what you have, what systems, what people, what
yeah.
are you trying to protect, so that you know that when you put capabilities in place, when you're training your people, that you're actually looking at the whole picture.
Excellent advice. Kelly, you've been a delight, and we do appreciate you being a contributor to the Safe House and helping a lot of people. I think a lot of people are going to listen to this and say, you know what, it makes a lot of sense, and I really appreciate. So you're going to help a lot of people.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be on. It's been great to chat with you, Jeff. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to follow up or reach out.
Thank you very much, Kelly. That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the SafeHouse Initiative. Thanks for joining us. And remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information about the SafeHouse Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen, or send us an email at info@safehouseinitiative.org, or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.